During the early 1950s, the US Army was in a frenzy trying to build a new ultra-modern armored fighting force. Vehicles like the M47 had proven to be less than optimal, and the M48 was serviceable but was not considered to be a true long-term solution. As a result, the Army would send out a desperate plea to America's major industrial players, specifically those in the war industry. In 1952, Detroit Arsenal would attempt to answer the Army's plea with the launch of a program which honestly exemplifies the craziness of early 1950s American tank development. This little program was fittingly named Question Mark. Specifically Question Mark 1, because unbelievably there was more than one of these. Now, as stated in the original pamphlet, the purpose of this program was to acquaint their customers, yes, that's the wording they used, with possible designs for future tank designs, and to determine which way to direct further development based on reaction to the proposals. What's funny is the pamphlet also states, tanks, like children's building blocks, can be put together in a variety of ways, resulting in a wide range of vehicles. Again, as the number of blocks limits the child's ingenuity, the status of current technology limits the number of features that can be combined in a single vehicle without compromising others. It is our earnest desire to give our customers the combination which most nearly fulfills their needs. The time is here, indeed past, when new and better combat vehicles should be developed and tested. If this pamphlet and the conference to discuss its contents enables us to firmly determine the direction of future development, it will have served its purpose. Now yes, it is here that I must admit that this is kind of a low-hanging fruit. I am attacking something that is basically more conceptual rather than something truly intended for production, but some of these proposals are terrible even conceptually. Anyway, the pamphlet proceeds to point out that the concepts provided are not to be represented as the only possibilities of immediate development, but Detroit Arsenal did feel the design should generate sufficient food for thought. The pamphlet then goes on to discuss specifically proposals that have the entire crew in the turret, and how anyone who has doubts or is simply curious about such a driving arrangement can go either to the Detroit Arsenal or Aberdeen Proving Ground, where they can test drive a vehicle with the driving controls in the turret. Unfortunately, I could not find images of either vehicle or really much information at all regarding what vehicle these test vehicles were built on. What's funny is it states the two test vehicles do not have provisions for a constantly forward-facing driver's position in the turret. So I bet that really helped to shut up the driver and turret naysayers. Anyway, it goes on to state how these concepts may potentially lead to the discussion of reducing the number of types of tanks that are required in the future. Engine layout was also an important part of the Detroit Arsenal's concepts, specifically the front drive or front engine installation's benefits in light-type vehicles due to placing, and this is a direct quote, more iron in front of the crew, and in light-skinned vehicles while not providing much difficulty with maintenance or servicing. There was also the discussion of how several proposals demonstrate what Detroit Arsenal referred to as a ballistically pure vehicle, which basically means the vehicle features the same protection up and down a vertical line, or in select cases, through a 30-degree angle to either side of the front. This was intended to provide balanced protection. This idea seems to have not really been a locked-in strategy, though, as the pamphlet states that thought should be given as to whether this balanced protection is preferable, or whether less protection close to the ground in favor of greater protection in the more readily available hit areas is desired. Surprisingly, and much to my chagrin, Detroit Arsenal decided to present each proposal with not only each design's primary advantages, but also any disadvantages or potential problems. Anyway, enough of this lackluster stuff, let's get to the tank proposals. Now we start first with the light tanks, specifically the L1. The L1 was to feature a front drive arrangement with a power package with the turret at the rear fitted with a 76mm T91E3 cannon, with armor stated to be equivalent to the T41E1, and an estimated weight of 17 tons with a horsepower per ton rating of 14.7 gross and 11.2 net. Now, when we come to the L1's primary benefits, they are stated to be an axis of the main gun trunnion located directly above the center of gravity to reduce the travel loads, reduced overhang of the main gun in travel and combat positions, resulting in decreased overall vehicle length. Power package mounted in the front produces a shorter and more compact hull assembly. Increased frontal hull slope produces a shorter and more compact hull assembly. Elimination of the power package cooling air grills reduces the weight, cost, and vulnerability of the vehicle, but I believe it would also reduce cooling. Anyway, rear hull escape door provides an accessible entrance and exit and facilitates ammunition loading in the vehicle. Reduced length of the vehicle controls decreases the cost and the fatality of the system. Front drive reduces track throwing, and greater ground contact length achieved with the trailing idler decreases the mean ground pressure and increases the front obstacle climbing ability of the vehicle. It also features jettisonable armored protected fuel tanks mounted on the rear of the hull. Now this all sounds good, but then we get down to the limitations, such as reduced obstacle climbing height, the driver's visibility being limited to 14 feet forward of the front of the vehicle, heat waves distorting the gunner's vision, difficulty accessing the power package due to the fastened front hull service plates, and the loader standing height being limited to 57 inches. It's not listed explicitly as a limitation, but can we please take a moment to appreciate the driver sitting on the floor of the vehicle with absolutely no headroom? Anyway, after the L1 comes the L2, which is literally the L1, but is fitted with a 90mm T139 main gun, weighs 19 tons, and has a horsepower per ton rating of 13.1 gross and 10.0 net. It even shares the same positives as the L1, but has two additional weak points, one being a low horsepower per ton ratio, and the other being ammunition loading restriction of main gun similar to the M47 tank. Well, then comes L3 and L4, which honestly look like L1 and L2. L3 carries the same 90mm T139 as the L2, although it weighs 22 tons, with a horsepower per ton rating of 19.5 gross and 13.6 net, with the L4 featuring double the frontal armor and a new weight of 25 tons, and a horsepower per ton rating of 17.2 gross and 12 net. The positives and negatives are somehow still the same. Thankfully, Detroit Arsenal would then begin to go back into their normal craziness, because then we reach the L5, which features a 105mm T140, and weighs 26 tons with a horsepower per ton rating of 16.4 gross and 11.5 net, with the L6 being based on the L5, but fitted with a larger power plant and a larger turret ring diameter, which brings the weight up to 30 tons with a horsepower per ton rating of 23.8 gross and 17 net. Now the L5 and L6 share most of the same benefits and negatives of the L1 through the L4. However, there's a new benefit, which is that the loader's standing height in the vehicle has been improved to 64 inches. However, there's a new problem of needing a 3,000 to 4,000 pound counterweight required to statically balance the turret in azimuth. Please note that despite being on the 6th iteration, we still do not have proper room for the driver. Now the L7 is a rather extreme departure from the previous designs, as it features a new oscillating turret design provided by Cadillac and a central arrangement with the engine now in the rear. This proposal features a 76mm T91E3, with a weight of 17 tons and a horsepower per ton rating of 14.7 gross and 11.1 net. Some of the benefits of this design are supposedly reducing the complexity of the gun mount and allowing the easier installation of an automatic loader, and improved fire and gun controls. The axis of the oscillating trunnion being located directly above the center of the suspension reduces travel loads on the elevating circuit, decreased vehicle width, and decreased vehicle length. The limitations, however, are quite interesting, as turret space is severely restricted thanks to the 60-inch diameter turret ring, excessively high ground pressure, the arrangement of the powertrain with the engine in the rear of the hull and the transmission in the front adversely affects the height and accessibility. And now, Detroit Arsenal apparently states that this vehicle, unlike the previous designs, features confined space for the driver, as well as possible pitching of the vehicle in motion due to the short wheelbase. Now, just in case the light tanks didn't seem crazy enough, we now get to the medium tanks. The M1 is the first proposal and is designed according to the optimum ballistic principle, and features a central driver position below and behind with a 100-inch turret ring, a 90mm T139 main gun, 4 inches of armor angled at 60 degrees, I don't know where specifically, but a weight of 40 tons with a horsepower per ton rating of 12.5 gross and 9.6 net. When it comes to this design's benefits, the 100-inch turret ring supposedly allows the turret's armor slope to be increased, more available space in the turret allowing more freedom of movement, locating the trunnion point behind the ring, which reduces materials needed for balancing weight in the turret bustle. Small shield area reduces vulnerable area. Re-entrant angle under gun mantlet eliminated. A supposed savings in weight by placing the driver behind the 100-inch turret ring. The driver has direct vision with gun and travel lock, and a cooling system that is ballistically superior. The limitations, however, are less than desirable, such as a low horsepower per ton ratio, the driver's vision being limited to periscope vision in the combat role, and the vehicle having the same silhouette as the T-48. Although a much bigger problem is the normal entrance and exit through the turret with emergency exit through the bottom only. Can we also please take a moment to appreciate how the driver continues to suffer despite the vehicle being larger? Then comes the M2, which is similar to the M1, but now features a new superior ballistic layout and a 108-inch turret ring to accommodate a 105mm T-140, and a new weight of 46 tons with a horsepower per ton rating of 14.9 gross and 11.6 net. Strangely, the vehicle features a new power plant as evidenced by the drawings and statistics, but it is not explicitly mentioned for some reason, unlike a lot of the other proposals. Anyway, benefits are unsurprisingly the same, and the low horsepower per ton issue has been eliminated, but a new problem has come to the foreground, which is that for the same ballistic protection, replacing the 90mm with a 105mm gun adds at least 6 tons to the vehicle. Then comes the M3, which sees a radical layout change where now the driver is in the turret. They now explicitly mention a new X engine, and a weight of 43 tons with a horsepower per ton ratio of 16.6 gross and 11.9 net. This design obviously provided some benefits, such as the driver and turret arrangement reducing the overall vehicle silhouette, greatly improved driver's visibility except for Commander's cupola blocking some of his vision, the driver being better able to aim the hull of the tank toward the target to offer better protection, the loader having easier access to ammunition as well as the possibility of improved ammunition handling to reduce loader fatigue, the driver being less vulnerable to mines, the crew being able to operate independently of the intercom in emergencies, the X engine and driver and turret arrangement allowing for superior ballistic protection at just 43 tons, and greater obliquity of the lower glacis being possible thanks to no longer needing to provide driver leg room, and the X engine reducing the overall hull height. It's when we get to the flaws of this design that this whole thing begins to sour, such as the driver moves relative to the turret and hull despite always facing forward, which is made even more nauseating when you realize he isn't even placed in the center line of the turret. The main gun's loading being limited to plus 15 degrees and minus 10 degrees elevation across the vehicle, despite the gun being able to fire at plus 20 degrees and minus 10 degrees elevation in any position. But the most notable obvious problem, and arguably one of the biggest, is what Detroit Arsenal described they themselves as an extreme gun overhang. It's clear that someone realized the M3 was probably a bit too radical, so the M4 and M5 deviated to a slightly more down-to-earth design, I say only slightly. The M4 featured a X-type power plant with a final drive in the front and the turret in the rear arrangement, a 90mm T-139 main gun, upper armor of 4 inches angled at 60 degrees, and lower 2.5-inch armor angled at 60 degrees, with a weight of 38 tons and a horsepower per ton rating of 18.8 gross and 13.5 net, and the M5 featuring the same armor and armament, however it is to be fitted with a, and I quote, conventional power plant, and as such has a horsepower per ton rating of 13 gross and 10 net. The benefits of both of these designs are pretty much the same as the L1. The flaws are yet again quite notable though, as obstacle climbing height has yet again been reduced, the driver's visibility being described as not adequate, heat distortion in the gunner sight again, and the inability to offer adequate frontal hull protection without severely affecting the ease of maintenance. Now, clearly that one employee at Detroit Arsenal who drew up the M3 happened to walk back into the room, so unlike the previous two designs that seemed slightly sane, the M6 and M7 yet again go completely off the rails. The M6 would feature a fully automated turret at the rear of the vehicle with the engine being in the front, and was to be fitted with a 105mm T-140 with the same armor as the M4 and M5, with a weight of 37 tons and a horsepower per ton rating of 19.3 gross and 13.8 net, with the M7 featuring a 90mm T-139, and as a result the weight was brought down to 32 tons and it now had a horsepower per ton rating of 22.2 gross and 16 net. The benefits of this vehicle included the recoil energy being used to actuate the auto loader, the trunnion reaction being very low, no flashback or fumes in the fighting compartment, and the elimination of the gun's counterweight, as well as simplified case ejection, and a gun that could be easily upgraded with stabilization. The limitations, though, are yet again the best part of the vehicle, such as gun servicing being complicated under combat conditions, yeah, you don't say, a lower line of sight for the commander and gunner, lowering the aspect of vision to such a degree that television or other similar devices may need to be used. But the best part for me is the commander's vision is so significantly hindered due to the commander sitting under the gun in the turret base, with the periscopes being so poorly thought out that the guy who draws the renders of the vehicle wasn't even able to figure out where said periscopes would actually go. Now don't worry, we only have 3 more vehicles here that we're going to cover in this video, that being the 2 heavy tank proposals. I say 2 because 2 of them are practically identical. But don't worry, it gets so much worse from here. First we have the H1 and H2. The H1 is set up with that infamous driver in the turret arrangement, and I kid you not, it is described as having unique frontal armor, and a 120mm T123E1, 5 inches of armor angled at 60 degrees, a weight of 50 tons, and a horsepower per ton rating of 23 gross and 16.5 net, with the H2 being pretty much the same vehicle outside of the installation of the 155mm gun howitzer T7. Strangely, despite not being listed under the vehicle layout, both vehicles are fitted with X engines as indicated under the vehicle benefits, which are generally the same as the M3, though this tank does offer some unique ones, such as being able to devise the ready round arrangement to reduce loader fatigue. Eliminating the upper glacis makes it possible to load ammunition directly into the hull front, equal front protection from top to bottom, and the entire frontal hull being effectively a reverse slope, which should make the vehicle invulnerable to HEP rounds. The limitation list is unrealistically short, but still significant, such as the driver moves relative to the turret and hull again, the extreme gun overhang, and best of all, the need for a mechanical loading assist. Now here's where I go off on my own speculating, but I believe that extremely sharp angle where the lower glacis meets the hull roof seems extremely dangerous, as impacts there could cause some insane stress on the welds, and considering the ammunition is piled up in the front of the vehicle like logs in a lumber mill, that could lead to some, how we say, less than pleasant consequences. I also have no clue how the front idlers are actually attached. On the cutaway they are just straight up floating, and on the mock-up they appear to be held on by some incredibly spindly suspension arm, which I believe said spindly idler supports probably wouldn't do so well in extreme cross-country travel. Now we have finally arrived at the poster child of question mark 1, Heavy Tank H3. The H3 was to feature a cleft turret with a conventional rear engine layout with the final drives in the front. However, this vehicle was to be armed with a massive 175mm T145 gun, and was to feature 5 inches of armor angled at 60 degrees, and was going to weigh a whopping 62 tons and have a horsepower per ton rating of 18.5 gross and 13.9 net. Hilariously, this vehicle has one of the shortest positives list of all the proposals, those positives being the elimination of large moving parts in the turret as compared to oscillating type turrets, brass disposal no longer being an issue, no fumes or flashbacks in the fighting compartment, the gun being suitable for stabilization, the centrally trunnioned gun moves the center of gravity toward the center of the suspension, and the movable out-of-balance mass used during turret rotation being held to a minimum. Now for my favorite part of any good tank project, the flaws. A harshly divided fighting compartment is one, the turret front being vulnerable to enemy fire, the need for extra armor to protect the gun mechanisms, turret slope being adversely affected, normal ceiling problems being increased tenfold, the possibility for the vehicle to overturn due to the high trunnion location, the 175mm gun requiring a redesign to permit the adoption of an automatic loader, and the sheer impracticality of using powder charges in bag form in a tank. Also, looking at the 2D cutaway drawing, I can't help but notice that there is no physical way for the loader to get to the back of the gun to load the shells. Also, the gun would have to either be in a limited recoil mount like in the T-58 Heavy, where it only recoils 12 inches, or would have to be mounted rigidly to avoid the gun breech violently striking the rear of the turret. Also, we must yet again pour one out for the driver, who shall not only be spending a lot of money on a chiropractor, but he will also be spending a lot of time recovering from concussions due to the top of his head having the equivalent space of a pack of Chesterfields. I also hope the crew in the turret has good fall protection with how comedically tall the turret is. Now, there is more to question Mark 1, such as various proposals for individual components such as slat armor in 1952, which is pretty crazy, but I generally only really wanted to focus on the main tank proposals. If you want to see all the stuff from the Question Mark 1 pamphlet, you can visit either Tank Encyclopedia, or you can support Harold Biondo on Patreon to see the beautiful, excessively high-resolution digital scans he has done of the original documentation. As for all of the proposals seen in this video, it's pretty clear that none of them ever really left the drawing board or mock-up phase, and unfortunately it seems that all that remains of these vehicles are the drawings and occasional photographs of mock-ups that sadly probably don't exist anymore. Thankfully, this was totally the worst of the US Army's Cold War tank programs, and it never got any worse than— Oh no, they put a Davy Crockett on a tank?!
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Well, anyway, that'll about do it for this video. I'm not gonna lie, this was a slog to edit. But anyway, I appreciate all of you coming here and watching it. I want to give a special shout out real quick to my YouTube members who are members of the Table Size Collective. That being Techno Idioto, the Mouse Guy, and I want to give a special shout out to Bombird205 on Patreon for becoming a member of the Monochrome. I do apologize for the delay with getting this video out, just things have been a little crazy lately. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, take care, God bless, and bye, I guess?